right. Hello everybody and welcome to the Living Coast Discovery Center Facebook Live video. Today I'll be talking about composting. My name is Catherine. I'm the Facilities and Sustainability Manager here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. I'm one of the few staff that are still here on site even though we're closed. I'm working hard to maintain a clean facility for our keepers here that are working to make sure our animals are safe, healthy, well-fed, and taken care of. Usually on a beautiful Sunday like this around this time, I'm out here in the compost demonstration garden along with some of my sustainability interns and master composter students, talking to the public and teaching them about how to compost in their backyard. Maybe they live in an apartment, or maybe they want to compost with their school groups or at work. But that's where I normally am. But today I'm out here alone, and I thought, what a great opportunity to teach people about ways that they can care for their environment while they're at home. So even though you might not be able to visit the center, visit the animals, take a walk on the trails out here right now, you're still able to do something good for the environment at home. Now, if you're being safe, of course, staying home, practicing social distancing, kids are at home from school, you probably have a lot more time on your hands, so you're cooking a lot more, making more meals at home. And with that, you probably have a lot more food waste that you're generating than normal. So why not take this waste and create healthy soil amendment to grow plants like our fruit and vegetable garden that we have right behind me here. Maybe you just have bare dirt in your backyard that you have a lot of weeds growing. You can use that compost as mulch to help suppress weeds. There's many benefits of composting, but today we'll go over a few. So what is composting actually, right? Composting is nature's way of recycling organic material into rich soil amendment. So over time, material like fruit and veggie scraps, twigs, leaves, all that type of stuff break down through decomposers like fungi, bacteria, and insects, and they create this nice rich soil. This soil amendment contains all the necessary nutrients that plants like these behind me need to grow. In your backyard you might have something more like this. This is sand-based dirt. Plant roots don't have much structure in here to hold on to. Water can travel through this type of dirt a lot more quickly as well. So adding in soil amendment or compost can help improve this soil structure. Maybe in your backyard you have something that looks more like this, right? A little bit darker in color, red, usually probably a lot more compacted, right? And if you think about plant roots trying to grow in this type of soil or dirt, right? They can only reach a certain point before the clay gets really hard and compacted. So you'll have shallow roots, water pooling at the base of those plants, and that can lead to root rot and stuff like that. So compost can benefit basically any type of dirt you have at home and is a great way to reduce the amount of waste we're sending to the landfills. And I see we have a question here. Sorry, I'm horizontal, so the questions are coming in at an angle here. But Ashley asks, how does compost mulch suppress the weeds? Wouldn't that make it more likely for them to grow? And good question, Ashley. Weeds tend to grow in the absence of nutrients, which is surprising. So when you usually have a lot of dirt around, that's when you'll notice there's an abundance of weeds growing. So by adding in this organic material, we can help suppress the the weeds naturally.
Taking composting to a whole other level.
Is this better?
There we go.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that works great.
Thank you.
Take it away, Catherine. You're doing great.
Thanks, Kelsey. Okay, so let's get back into it. But once we put thicker layers of organic material over the dirt, there'll be less weeds growing because they need less nutrients actually. So one of the main reasons why the Living Coast Discovery Center puts on these compost, thanks to the City of Chula Vista's Environmental Services Division, is to teach their residents and community members about ways to reduce their waste and that they send to the landfills. So when you throw out food waste and you don't throw out your trash from your home for a couple days, it probably starts to get really stinky, right? And that's because the organic material is breaking down in that trash bag by an anaerobic process. So if you think about that at a landfill where everybody's trash is going and it's getting buried by all this other inorganic material, right? That trash is that food waste and plant waste is breaking down, but a harmful byproduct of that anaerobic process is the release of methane gas into the atmosphere. And this methane is 30 times more potent at trapping heat in our atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So by reducing the amount of organic waste sending to landfills, we're helping the environment out and reducing methane. Now, if you're just tuning in, we are in the middle of a composting workshop. My name is Catherine. I'm the Facilities and Sustainability Manager here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. And we're going to talk about how compost happens, and that's through the members of the FBI, or decomposers. Now, the FBI stand for fungus, bacteria, and invertebrates. The fungus in the compost pile like the dry woody materials, and they will be things, I'll show you what I have here, what we call browns or carbon-rich material. So I'm going to my compost recipe. Things like twigs, straw, leaves, grass clippings, paper, stuff like that are considered a brown, and this is what the fungi like to break down. Now the bacteria in the compost pile really like to break down fruit and veggie scraps like this, and these are going to be our greens. The bacteria in the compost pile are the reason why some compost piles can get very hot. So here at the Living Coast Discovery Center, I do monitor the temperature of our compost piles with thermometers like this. You can get this online right now. This is from RioTemp. This is a great way to monitor the activity of your compost pile, whether or not you need to add ingredients, turn it. But a nice active range for composting is in the 90 to about 140 range, right in this area here. That's what we're always aiming for. So today, in a few minutes actually, I'm going to start the beginning of a compost pile, and next week when we return, we'll take a look and see what temperature we're at. Going back to our bacteria, they'll break down this material the most. They're the reason why our compost piles are hot, and we need to provide oxygen in our pile by turning it to feed the bacteria, okay? And then last but not least, of course, we have insects, things like worms, sow bugs, earwigs, ants. All these things are necessary for the composting. There really isn't a bad bug in the compost pile. Okay? So let's go over to what I have set up over here. I did a little prep work for today. We're going to be composting today with a bin that sits on the ground. So this is ideal for people who maybe have a backyard space, whether it be mulch, dirt, grass. You can compost in that setting. You don't necessarily need a fancy plastic bin like this. This is a BioStack stackable bin, so I'll show you how that works. There's many different types. Like here is a soil saver bin. There's no bottom, so it sits directly on the ground. Has a lid on top that can come off. Okay. You can make these bins with wood pallets, with any extra things lying around the house. Maybe you have some couple trash cans like this lying around the house. You can cut the bottom off and bury that into the ground a little bit and use that as a bin instead. So composting doesn't necessarily require tons of money to start up your bins. You can work with whatever materials you have at home. Now, to start the compost pile, we need to have the perfect environment for the FBI. So those are going to be our ingredients that I showed you on our compost recipe here. Okay, browns, greens, and blues. So browns are going to be things like small twigs, branches, dried leaves, dried grass clippings, shredded paper, wood chips, dryer lint, paper towels, shredded paper as long as it's not glossy or magazine print paper, newspaper, shredded cardboard, egg cartons. The list goes on and on. So there's a lot of material coming from your home that can be included in our carbon or browns ingredient for our compost recipe. The other half of the compost pile is our greens or nitrogen-rich products, things like fruit and veggie scraps, plant waste material, green grass clippings, trimmings from the yard, coffee grounds, tea leaves. There are some types of food that we want to minimize, like meat and dairy, so we don't attract unwanted critters and unwanted smells to our compost pile. But even farm animal manure, or manure that comes from animals that eat only plants, otherwise known as herbivores, can be used to help speed up the decomposition process. And then our last ingredient here are blues, which is air and water. You want your compost pile to feel like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry. If any of these ingredients are off balance, you might notice some bad odors from your pile or an excess of flies, and there's many ways, easy fixes to fix all those problems actually. And then last ingredient, air, right? We want to turn our compost pile regularly to provide oxygen for the bacteria in the compost pile, and they eventually turn into healthy soil like that. Okay, so to start our compost pile, I'm going to have to see if I can set you guys up so you can see what I'm doing. Give me a moment. Earlier, but it wasn't seem to working. So if you're just tuning in, I'm Catherine, Facilities and Sustainability Manager here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. I am about to start building a compost pile from scratch with some ingredients that I've prepped ahead of time. But hopefully you can do this in your own backyard if you have the space. In the next coming weeks though, I'm going to be going over different composting methods. So if you live in an apartment or condo and don't have the space like we do here, obviously, to have a pile outside, there's ways to compost indoors, but we'll go over that in future weeks. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start with a layer of browns on the bottom. So here I have some wood chips that have been soaking. Let me know if you can hear me too. I know there's wind and stuff around and I don't have a microphone, so I'm trying to project. But I'm taking these wood chips that I've had soaked in this water for about an hour, and I'm going to layer this on the bottom. Okay, this is our browns or carbon-rich material. I'm also going to mix in a little bit of straw. And I want to get a nice, probably 3 to 5 inch layer of browns right here on the bottom. You can wear gloves, of course, if you don't like to get your hands dirty. But I do this a lot, so I'm used to it at this point. Okay? You can take your pitchfork. It's a tool like this with the prong teeth to kind of help spread that out in your bin. Just make sure you can see. ground. Sorry about that, had to turn on the water. I'm going to make sure that these grounds are nice and moist so that it attracts the fungal activity. I'm just going to wet it down just like that. Now, what I have here in this bin are some food scraps that a staff member who's here has been collecting. So in here, apple core, avocado pit, and peel, coffee grounds, looks like a bell pepper that went a little moldy. All this material can be composted. Whether it's already moldy, it's a green bag of mush in your refrigerator. It's halfway through the decomposition process. So we're going to add this in. Like that. To be honest, this is the most smelly part of composting. If you store your food in a bucket for a few days, it gets a little stinky. But in the compost pile itself, not so bad. I also have a bucket of spent grain from one of our volunteers, previous master composter students. We use the spent grain from the beer making process to compost. Now, listening at home, do you think the grains here are brown or green? Are they a nitrogen product or a carbon-rich brown product? Even though they might be brown in color, they're going to be part of our greens or nitrogen-rich category. Once I applied that stuff, I'm going to just mix it a little bit. Okay. I'm going to add more browns. Mix it in like that. I have some plant trimmings from the garden that I'm going to add. And adding more straw. I'm going to add my second part of my bin here. So maybe you're doing some yard work with the family, keeping up with these rains we've been having. You can throw in your yard waste. I like to keep out a lot of weeds and diseased plants just to make sure that I have good compost to apply in my garden. So remember, we want it to be nice and moist, so I'm adding a little bit of water. And I'm just going to add a little bit more spent grain. Okay? Adding my mulch again. Okay, and then I'm going to give this all a really good mix. Adding a little more straw. You can add leaves, whatever material you might find at home. I'm going to take you guys now so you can see what I got going on. So I've kind of mixed everything together at this point, but under here I have the greens, food waste, stuff like that. You can see that I didn't add any dirt whatsoever. You do not need to add any dirt to your compost. The material like this will break down over the course of a few weeks to a couple months, and what it turns into is healthy soil amendment that you will then add into your dirt to fix and make healthy soil. So last but not least, I want to make sure that I put a dry layer of browns on top, because when I come to check on this in about a week, I do not want a mouthful of flies. I also don't want to be able to smell the food waste breaking down. So I'm going to add in a few of these toilet paper rolls just to see what they look like in a couple weeks, see how they've broken down. So I'm just going to kind of bury them in there. And then last, I'm going to take my shredded paper from the office and cover it up and keep it nice and dry. Okay? And then put my last bin on top. Sorry, it's hard to do this one-handed. And then put my lid on top. Okay? And that is it. Starting my compost pile. So next week, at 2 p.m. next Sunday, we'll go ahead and take a look at what this compost pile is looking like after only 1 week of decomposition. And in other series, I'll show you what compost looks like at different stages. But in case you want a quick peek, I see lots of bugs, lots of food waste still breaking down in here. But we'll talk about that more in the future. My name is Catherine, the Facilities and Sustainability Manager here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. I'll be on for a couple more minutes if you have any more questions. But let's see. Tell everyone out there hello from Dr. Flint's office. Thanks, Deborah. And Teresa asks, how do you keep gophers from digging up into your bin? Great question. Here at the Living Coast Discovery Center, I have an ongoing struggle with squirrels, small rodents. We are on a national wildlife refuge in the Sweetwater Marsh, so they're everywhere, and we work. They're very important to this ecosystem, but I don't want them in the compost piles because they eat up all the food waste. So if you have gophers at home, let me show you some of our other bins here. We've had to put down, I don't know if you can see, hardware cloth or chicken wire on the floor here to keep the bigger critters out. They can't really dig through this, but it allows the FBI from the ground to come into the bins. So if you have gopher problems, squirrel problems, stuff like that, putting a chicken wire like that on the ground would help. And one last thing I wanted to cover before I leave is hopefully during this week, maybe you and your family will start collecting some material to start a compost pile if you don't compost already. But how do you know what is a green and what is a brown, right? Because it looked like some things can be both a green and a brown. And the way to know the difference is to think of if an item was left in a trash bag out on the sidewalk in front of your house for a couple days, sealed up, and you came back to that bag and you open it up. The greens are higher and have a higher water content. So the bagged goods probably stink, first of all. There might be liquid forming at the bottom of that bag, and the material inside the bag is already looking like it's breaking down. Okay? So those are going to be a green. So like a coffee ground, right? Fresh from the coffee pot, it's very wet, and if you were to put that in a trash bag, left it outside for a while, the material over a couple of days' time will start to smell and break down. So that's when you'll know an item is a green or high in nitrogen content. Now, if the material inside the bag stays pretty fresh, it doesn't really break down, there's no change in smell or liquid at the bottom of the bag, then it's most likely a brown or carbon-rich material. So when you're starting your pile, like you saw I did today, I did about a 50-50 ratio of the carbon to nitrogen or browns to greens. Then I made sure my browns were nice and moist so that they attract our FBI, except for the very top layer that was dry brown, but everything else inside was mixed in with a little bit of water. So in case you're wondering, that is the difference. Richard says, where can I find a temperature gauge for my compost pile? So this one is a San Diego-based company called Reotemp, R-E-O-T-E-M-P. I find these at nurseries, Home Depot. You can of course buy them online directly from this supplier or Amazon. But of course, you know, we should be staying home as much as possible, so ordering it online would be the best. Otherwise, you can even use a food grade thermometer, you know, that you use like for turkeys. It's smaller, it has a smaller stem, so you just gotta bring it further down into the pile, but it'll work. So I'm going to be signing off here. Thank you for tuning in to our compost workshop series. My name is Catherine. I'm Facilities and Sustainability Manager here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. We're hoping you're staying home safe, social distancing, self-isolating, cooking all your healthy meals, and now you can compost that food waste and fix the soil in your backyard. Next week we will be talking about ways to compost in an apartment, condo setting, or if you don't have a backyard space. But until then, we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.